This is the Grizzly King, and I am tying it according to the illustration in Mary Orvis Marbury's book, Favorite Flies and Their Histories. It's a very iconic fly, and you will find examples of it throughout the internet and probably in a great many books. I'm using a sproat number 8 hook. So sproat has this gradual bend at the back, and then when it comes down around towards the hook, it comes straight. I'm also using one with a straight eye. I think that this hook most closely resembles the hooks that Mary used or that are illustrated in Mary's book. I used the straight eye instead of a blind eye, and I'll talk about that later when I tie the head. I am using claret thread because I think the head in the illustration is claret. For the tail, I'm using red dyed turkey shoulder. I just have one small slip, and I'm going to tie that with the point up a little bit longer than the shank of the hook. So I'll just hold that in on top of the hook right there and wrap over it and cinch it in. Keep it on top of the hook, and then I'll wrap forward on it. This is a dubbed body, so I'm not real concerned about how even the body is underneath, although I don't want it to be lumpy. But I can just take that up the whole length of the body, and it'll give it a little bit of bulk. For the rib, I'm going to be using gold oval tinsel. And it doesn't matter if it ties in kind of on the back or even on the bottom of the shank. One of the drawbacks that I have found with the sproat hook is because that bend starts so far towards the eye on the shank that my tails end up being, fairly forward because I don't want them to come too far down that bend. Otherwise, they will go down kind of along the shape of the hook rather than curve upwards. I have some green dubbing that I'm going to use for the body. If I wet my fingers before I twist that onto the thread, I tend to get a little bit better control. I want to get a nice point at the top of that dubbing. That way I can work on creating a little bit of a taper. Get it wrapped on a couple of times and then tighten up the dubbing on the thread. And get good coverage as I wrap my way forward. If I don't have enough dubbing, then I can just add some more. And we'll see what this looks like. I think I want maybe just a little bit more. I won't take a lot. I would need to make sure I leave plenty of room out behind the eye for the wings and the front hackle. And I think that looks good. I'm going to counter wrap which means go the other direction with the rib. That makes sure that it rests on top of the dubbing and doesn't work its way down between the dubbing wraps. I'll tie 3 wraps over the top of that rib, and then I'll just pull back on the rib and wrap tight 3 times underneath of it. And then I will clip out the extra there. For the wing, I'm using mallard flank. So this is this feather that's got this barring in it, and I'm going to do what's called a rolled wing. So this looks like it's a kind of a center. The wing is very even on both sides, so I can, or the feather is very even on both sides, so I can just take pieces off of each side of the feather rather than on separate feathers. But I'm going to just grab a clump from this feather and at approximately the width of the gape or the gap of the hook. And I want 2 of those, so 1 from each side. And then I'm going to put those 2 bunches together. They don't really have to back to back or anything perfectly, because what I'm going to do is roll them. I do want the tips to be even from both of those pieces. And then I'm just going to roll them in my fingers. Wetting my fingers is going to help a little bit. Roll them. And then I can kind of even them out, flatten them out. The first one of these Grizzly kings that I tied, and pull a few out there because I want to even ends on it. I thought, wow, that's kind of a strange looking wing. It's not really a nice wing like you would have from a slip. And then the more research I did on this fly, that's what this wing is. So it's just a clump of rolled barbs from the flank feathers of a mallard. And there are other waterfowl that have similar feathers you could probably use as well. I want that wing to be about as long as the hook is back to the bend. So I'll just tie that in and wrap back. And on this particular fly from Mary's book, I am tying the wing in before I tie the hackle in. Most of the trout flies, I do it the other way. Tie the hackle in and then tie the wing in on top of it. Not real happy with that. I want a little bit heavier wing than that. So I'm just going to grab another clump of barbs and just add it. Give myself a little bit heavier, fuller wing. Okay, that's a little bit better. Clip out the butt ends. Then for the hackle, because this is called a Grizzly King, I'm using Grizzly. This is a rooster hackle, but it's what we would call the saddle. These are the feathers that are along the back side of the rooster. They're bigger, fluffier feathers, not as stiff as you would use for a dry fly. And I'm going to, well, I've checked the length of the barbs. Right, the barbs should be about 1 to 1.5 the length of the gape, so that's about what I've got there. And I will, and this is just the tip of one of those feathers, I will pull down on the barbs right at the butt of my hackle feather and trim out the barbs right next to the rachis. That rachis is that middle stem in the feather. And when I give it that crew cut, I have those really short little barbs there, and that's what the thread will grab onto and make sure that that is tied in. And then I am tying it with the shiny side up so that the barbs bend back towards the bend of the hook, or the back of the hook. And it's not a real full hackle on this wet fly. And you'll notice that I have those barbs standing up a lot more than I want them to, so I'm going to just wrap up over the tip of this hackle feather, wet my fingers, and pull back, exposing what will be the head. And then, because I want these barbs to lay back, not like a dry fly, but in the wet fly style, to bend back even more towards the bend of the hook. I'll just wrap up over, and then I can snap out that tip. Now, Mary did not have to be concerned about not crowding the eye of her flies because she used hooks that did not have eyes. They were called blind eyes, or blind hooks. And instead, she would tie in a piece of gut, which is the inside of the silk moth caterpillar, the gland where the silk is produced. Those caterpillars were sacrificed, that gland and its content was taken out, stretched, twisted together into a strand that was called gut, and then that was tied on to the hook. Sometimes it was made with an eye right there. More often there was a length of it with the eye on the end of the length. I put a whip finish to put a knot on my head. Just take my scissors and push them against the thread to cut it out. And then in a contemporary twist, I'm going to put a little drop of diluted goop. So I stick a needle in my jar, pick up a drop, put that on the head. That'll soak in and dry clear. This number 8 hook has a fairly large eye on it, but just to make sure that I haven't got goop in the eye, I will take the tip of a hackle feather, poke it through that eye, and make sure that my fly is clean and tippet ready.